did attend the August 2014 teach-in about Ferguson and the recent killing of Mike Brown. What the teach-in in 2014 really showed me was the importance of bringing community members into academic spaces, into classroom spaces even. I feel like in a lot of ways we think about things like that as teaching opportunities, as learning opportunities, and we don't often see what's going on outside of the walls of the academy, really. So that really struck me, and I ended up bringing a guest speaker into my class just to make sure that I had some kind of grounding in something outside of, assigned readings, even if they were, about Twitter activism and that kind of thing. But with a lot of the events on campus, I didn't have any students participate in them. And I offered some extra credit if they just kind of posted to our discussion forum about any of these events. But there was the film Cincinnati Goddamn that happened right at the beginning of the semester. Ta-nehisi Coates came to campus the week we were reading the book. Did not have any students go to that. The OSU to Mizzou march, I don't know if any students went. Nobody wrote about it. And I guess I should qualify that students might have gone to these things, but they didn't write about it and they didn't register it with the class. I tried to bring back some of the things Coates said in his talk that might help contextualize some of the things in the book. And I provided links to all of these resources and the Facebook page for the OSU to Mizzou march. And I, had a running catalog or calendar of all of the events that were going on campus, including the Hip Hop Literacies Conference that's this semester. Even if students didn't attend these events were present on the Carmen page, and they were present in some of the ways that, I talked about them in class and brought them up. And I think that I was all the more happy that I had scheduled a guest speaker to come into the class, even though it would have been great for students to go and think about these issues in places outside of the class that we had constructed. I decided to include Ta-nehisi Coates' Between the World and Me, as well as the guest speaker, kind of thinking of them as writers with causes, as people who were engaged in anti-racist work from some different angles and perspectives in the community, in the public sphere. So when we read Coates, I really wanted him to be some voice that wasn't me, that was talking about these issues, and we could kind of see how he's contextualizing them and experiencing them as well. So he's a challenging read. He was really challenging to them. What my students really struggled with, the aftermath of 9/11 and his perception that police and other rescue workers were being elevated to this mythic status in New York City, where he was living, when he was dealing with what was completely out of the spotlight, which was a police-involved shooting of one of his good friends. We had some really challenging conversations that then picked up with the guest speaker, which was really cool. So Aramis Sundiata was who I contacted. I really wanted Aramis to, share with us his experience with organizing, maybe his thoughts on ways the academy is or is not helpful in that. And I didn't want him to end up being kind of put under a spotlight and kind of examined by students and grilled about well, what do you think about this, or what do you think about this? So I really wanted it to be more of a dialogue. So I had the students do this project, which I called a class autoethnography, where they went back through their responses to some of the readings they had done during the semester and really tried to examine, even asked them to sort of code what kind of themes they were seeing emerge from that. So the spotlight, the kind of research lens was kind of put back on them. I kind of tipped off Aramis right before we went into the class, and I was like, the students had a really hard time with what Coates said about 9/11 with the police officers after 9/11. And he was ready. He wanted them, he's like, I hope they ask me about that. And eventually they did. And he fielded that by, you know, asking them, like, what they thought racism was. And there was a really cool moment in the class where I had a student who asked him, like, well, what do you think racism is? And he was like, well, what do you think racism is? How do you define racism? And I could tell she was a little flustered, but she had been doing her own research on bullying. And in her reflection about the guest speaker, said that she actually gave a definition of bullying as her definition of racism. So there was this kind of cool, like, researcher and organizer, you know, moment where they could kind of see across these different contexts and how, you know, power is wielded through different contexts and against different people. But it's still an issue of power, which is ultimately what Aramis really wanted them to see was, you know, racism wasn't so much bias as it was the ability to wield power against somebody. That was a really, I think, productive moment, and I think in general, from course evaluations and conversations with students after this, the guest speaker was something that really helped them contextualize Coates a little bit better. I think his response to Coates was, well, do you think he was trying to make you feel that way? And they were like, whoa. So that works. So they were left with that.